Alright, chapter 1 of texture. We've already gotten into texture a little bit, so that was kind of like my clue to move on. Move on from refine and into texture. So basically, what I'm going to do is I really kind of feel that I want to work on this section. It's just like screaming out to me to like get it done. And you know, part of me wants to think about fixing my measurements a little bit, but let's just put some texture in and let's not get so anal about. I'm going to try it. Just going to move that over. Let's just brush that off. Make sure there's no eraser crumbs. So, yeah, I'm still, believe it or not, can you believe it, in this late stage of the drawing, I am still adjusting my measurements. Now, I'm adjusting them by less than 1/16 of an inch, and that's okay, but I'm adjusting them nonetheless. So we want to not have an outline. We want to have that line that I just put in become tone, because outlines are going to equal flatness. And I'm still kind of semi-pressing down hard, but not ultra hard to make a black. Now remember, last chapter in last chapter in refine, I told you that I was working on that little rim light on the edge, and so I'm just kind of putting that in right now. That's just like a nice little delicate touch that adds another dimension to your drawings. Let's just kind of get rid of that line. And I think I'm going to try to use this eraser that Andy gave me. Andy from the United Kingdom, all the way. Oh, this pencil came overseas, so that's kind of very cool to me. And here we are using it in Long Island, New York. I hope I didn't say that with my bad accent. Okay, so better. Now let's put the texture on there. So basically, this is another opportunity for beautiful convex. So first thing I'm doing is I'm looking at the distance between here and there. It makes like a triangular shape. It's got a little texture. You want to, as much as possible, I'm looking at the angles of this chip. I'm looking at that thing right there. The more you can do this with a convex continuous line, the better it's going to look. So now this next little chip gets more done, more with the eraser. And so I can just put like a little bit of tone right there. Got some striations, some chips over there. This is sharper, very sharp right here. From life, I have to admit, it's so much better to look at than from the photo. There's just not as much information. Now, just a side note, this cast was not terribly expensive. The casts and the statues at the Metropolitan Museum of Art start at like $300. This one was like less than 150, I believe. I think it was like 140s, and so that's pretty good. Now, DesignToscano.com, I believe it is, Toscano.com is the place that I got it from. A lot of their statues are a tad on the tacky side, and you know, they have a lot of garden statues, but they have like one or two good ones that I think are pretty inexpensive, and this is one of them, and that's why I bought it. Now, James Quist is a student that I used to have at SVA. He's a member of DrawingTutorialsOnline.com. He turned me on to a new gallery called the Juiced Gallery. I hope I'm saying it right. And I'm probably going to buy a bust from there, like a head and shoulders. And you'll see the quality of that there. I just want to, this cast drawing has changed a lot for me, doing it for you, the cast drawing project. I want to try to incorporate more of this into my classes, and it's a little intimidating if somebody just comes into my class for the first day and they've got all of a sudden start to draw a live nude model. So I want to give people the opportunity to also learn the old-fashioned way with the casts. Now, someone was asking me, let's get into side notes while I'm just kind of playing with the texture over here. Someone had asked me, it actually might have been Andy from England, United Kingdom, why did artists start to draw with casts in the first place way back when? Well, I think part of the reason why they did was most of the statues that the students were drawing from had a certain aesthetic to them versus just kind of drawing the model. I mean, you can get a model on the stand and the pose that they take is not graceful. It's not pretty. No matter what you do to the drawing, it's just not going to look good. A knee can be bent a weird way. A foot could be kind of like sticking out a weird way. So the cast drawing, partially, one of the reasons why the artists were trained was to give them a sense of like aesthetic and grace and to see how things kind of should look at that time. They were kind of training almost like their eye to be like a little bit more classical, a little bit more graceful. And I see that happens. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. I learned my lesson the hard way. A few times, like in the past, I would hire a model, and I'd pay them pretty good money for the day, and I would draw in a classroom, and they would take a pose, and, I didn't really give too much thought in the beginning to the type of pose that they took, and they took the pose, and the pose was not graceful at all. So I wind up spending the entire day on a drawing that's never going to look good, just because the pose aesthetically wasn't pleasing to the eye. Maybe it was the way like one knee was bent, or it was the way they were sitting, or it was the way like their hands were placed. And so part of the reason for the whole cast drawing thing was to institute taste, I guess, taste of the time into students' eyes and into their kind of psyche. Okay, so I'm a little heavy-handed over here with the texture, but that's just like our first go-through with it. And you can see I'm looking at the monitor. It doesn't look bad. I see this paper starting to get the effects of my hand rubbing against it. So all of this I'm just measuring from here to here. I'm matching values. We're going to have to go back in there now with a sharper pencil. I've got to sharpen all my pencils. Little tonal gradation over here. This is where you've got to be very careful what you're drawing because you can overwork it. And you can start making mud. You can put too much pencil down. You can overwork the paper. It's a lot of things. So at this point in the drawing, you really want to make every line count. Now I know that's easier said than done, but that should be your goal. Try to make every line that you put down count and don't overwork. Okay, because the paper is just going to start to not take much more abuse, depending on the paper that you're working on. Okay, we're going to come back and work more on this texture.